I had always dreamed of becoming a mother, and after years of struggling with infertility, I decided to adopt a girl from an orphanage. When I surprised my husband, Ryan, with the news, he was taken aback, but his eyes sparkled with curiosity and excitement. Sitting on a bench in the hospital garden, I couldn't hold back my tears. The tender touch of new leaves sprouting in the soft breeze, the sun wrapping everything in gentle light, and the warm earth carrying the sweet scent of spring filled me with a bittersweet longing. Spring had always been my favorite season. Typically, I would have relished this time of year, planning for the summer adventures ahead. But the loneliness I felt weighed heavily on me, drowning out the joy that should have filled my heart. Ryan, my beloved husband, had always been my rock, the one who understood me better than anyone else. But now, he lay unconscious in the intensive care unit. Just 6 months ago, he had been healthy and full of life. His presence alone had chased away my fears. Even in my saddest moments, his words had the power to lift me up, reminding me that hope was always just around the corner. Now, though, as I looked at him lying in that hospital bed, he tried to muster what little strength he had left to reassure me that we would get through this together. That day, I fought to hold back my tears, wanting to be strong for him. I didn't want him to use up his precious energy comforting me when he needed it most. Yet, Ryan saw right through my facade, understanding exactly what I felt. Though he was unaware of the severity of his condition, I kept in close contact with Dr. Cameron, his physician, constantly seeking updates and hoping for a miracle. My parents had gone to great lengths to ensure Ryan received the best care from the brilliant Dr. Cameron. They believed that once he started treatment, the worst would pass, and Ryan would regain his strength. But even the best doctor couldn't perform miracles, and Ryan's condition only continued to deteriorate. Watching my husband suffer was almost unbearable. He had once been so vibrant and full of life, and now he looked pale, frail, and worn, dark circles under his eyes. His voice was barely a whisper, making it difficult to understand his words. Recently, Dr. Cameron had informed me that the disease was advancing rapidly. Ryan's vital signs worsened, and the treatments seemed to lose their effectiveness. Despite this, we had yet to hear anything from the donor bank, and the waiting list was overwhelming. Ryan had always been a robust child, rarely falling ill, towering above his peers with a strong, athletic build. His golden hair and bright complexion complemented his warm, inviting smile. I often thought about how beautiful our children would be together, imagining their bright futures. Ryan possessed exceptional genes, but he knew nothing of his biological parents, having grown up in an orphanage. I recalled a nurse telling him about his past when he was old enough to understand. His mother had been a beautiful woman, but misfortune had struck her, leaving her unable to care for another child, and she had abandoned him at the hospital. Ryan had spent his childhood in an orphanage, never being adopted by any family. Sometimes, he shared with me the painful memories of his early years, but he never lamented or complained about it. He always had a positive outlook on life. I understood that despite growing up in difficult circumstances, he was one of the kindest and most sensitive people I had ever met. We had met in college. My friends and I had decided to gather at a local bar to celebrate the end of our exams. That night, I felt radiant, drawing the attention of many. Some of my friends had been invited to dance, and many men approached me as well. I politely declined the invitation from an older man and also turned down a young man's offer, which felt arrogant and insincere. I wanted to enjoy my time with my friends more than entertain those unpleasant advances. As the night wore on, I sat alone at the table when Ryan approached me. Ryan wore a gray t-shirt and worn jeans, his tousled blonde hair and captivating blue eyes left a lasting impression. I was immediately drawn in by his gentle smile. I smiled back and invited him to join me at my table. Ryan accepted the invitation and naturally began to converse with me. It felt as though there had been a connection between us all along. Impressed by his honesty and sincerity, I genuinely enjoyed my time with Ryan. We exchanged introductions, and the conversation flowed comfortably and smoothly. There was never an awkward silence or a tense moment. When my friends returned to the table, Ryan treated them politely but didn't try to steal the spotlight. As soft music played in the background, Ryan suggested we dance. I felt a warmth and comfort in his embrace. Though I knew little about his past or life, I was already captivated by him. He was called away by a friend, promising to return shortly. I waited for him to come back, hoping for our connection to deepen. While my friends chatted animatedly, I couldn't shake thoughts of Ryan from my mind. I already missed him, and the absence of exchanging contact information or making specific plans only amplified my anxiety. Sophie noticed my forlorn expression and asked about my special someone. I tried to conceal my true feelings and replied calmly, "He's not a special person." Catherine found my calm demeanor endearing, suggesting we continue the party at another bar. When we arrived at the next destination, I was surprised to see Ryan again. I asked him how he knew I was there, and he told me he had been searching for us the whole time. His dedication touched me deeply. Catherine invited Ryan into the bar, but I suggested we take a walk instead. As we walked together, we shared conversation and comfortable silences. When we reached my house, Ryan's kiss moved me, and I felt all my doubts vanish in that moment. Under the starry sky, we began our relationship. At first, I was astonished when I heard about Ryan's life. He grew up in an orphanage, and his experiences had shaped his strength. I was impressed by how he had devoted himself to his studies, eventually earning a place at a prestigious university, where he became one of the top students. During this time, he also started working part-time. Though we were the same age, Ryan seemed so much more mature. I received financial support from my parents, and sometimes I felt like I was still a child. Ryan was kind and understanding, and he craved affection. I recognized that this was something I had missed in my own childhood, so I cherished his honesty and kindness even more. I felt grateful for our chance meeting at that bar. On the day of our college graduation, when Ryan proposed, I was enveloped in immense joy. Our relationship had already become strong, thanks to the warm welcome from our families. My mother empathized with Ryan's difficult past, treating him like her own son. She had a feeling that our future would be bright. On the other hand, my father saw in Ryan the calm maturity of an adult. Our wedding, modestly funded by Ryan's savings, was a simple affair. As newlyweds, we began living together in Ryan's apartment. He took on many household chores, and I enjoyed discovering the joys of cooking, learning the creative pleasures it brought. Thanks to Ryan's support and kindness, I never felt disheartened when my cooking didn't go perfectly. We dreamed of traveling, having a bigger home, and a large family. Ryan, yearning for warmth in our home, joked about wanting many children, and I laughed, replying, "About 10 sounds just right." However, as the years passed, our dream of having children remained unfulfilled. While friends celebrated pregnancies and births, I felt joy for them, but gradually, a sense of disappointment spread within me. I understood Ryan's suggestion to seek medical help when he recognized my struggle. The tests revealed that while Ryan was healthy, I faced serious infertility issues. I felt the weight of blame pressing down on me, wrapping around my chest like a vice. Ryan gently mentioned options like IVF and adoption, encouraging me to keep my spirits up. I had always dreamed of having children who looked like him, but he reassured me that love is what truly matters. The journey through IVF was a tumultuous path, filled with glimmers of hope and deep disappointments. With each failed attempt, I found my health declining, both physically and emotionally. I could see the concern in Ryan's eyes as he witnessed my exhaustion, and he suggested we pause the treatments. He wanted us to focus on enjoying our life together, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief in his words. I longed for a large family, but more than that, I cherished the joy of my life with Ryan. He proposed adoption as an alternative, but initially, I hesitated, questioning where those children would come from. Ryan, drawing from his own experiences in an orphanage, emphasized that the love we could give mattered far more than biology. He showed me his desire to take responsibility for our future family while prioritizing my well-being. Trusting Ryan brought me comfort, and I felt supported in a way I had never experienced before. But life had other challenges in store for us. Things began to change when Ryan, once bursting with energy, started feeling fatigued. He would come home from work and head straight to bed, a shift that felt alarmingly out of character for him. To most, it might have seemed trivial, but for Ryan, it was a concerning sign. He had always been so lively, fixing things around the house or taking me out for walks. Yet gradually, his fatigue worsened. He would return home pale and breathless, completely drained. With his appetite diminishing and his weight dropping rapidly, worry consumed me. The sudden appearance of unexplained bruises compelled me to urge Ryan to see a doctor. He thanked me for my concern, admitting he already had an appointment scheduled. My heart raced with anxiety, but I wanted to believe it was nothing serious. I thought the hospital would deliver news of a simple vitamin deficiency, maybe a prescription, and we'd move on. But the diagnosis shattered my hopes. Ryan had developed a rare autoimmune disease that attacked his own blood. His body was locked in a battle against itself, and there was no treatment available to cure him. The doctors could offer only limited and temporary remedies, but it felt like a cruel joke. Our once vibrant life together was turned upside down, and our plans, dreams, and hopes seemed to vanish in an instant. What had once felt like a monumental issue, our struggle to have children, now seemed insignificant next to Ryan's health crisis. I remember the moment my parents received the devastating news about Ryan's health. They were utterly shocked, and I could see the determination in their eyes to do whatever it took to secure the best medical care for him. When they successfully arranged for Dr. Cameron to oversee Ryan's treatment, a wave of relief washed over me. I truly believed that Ryan would recover. But as days turned into weeks, his condition continued to worsen. He spent most of his time at home, feeling unwell and barely able to move. Despite this, Ryan always tried to stay optimistic. He would joke around, trying to make me laugh, even when I could see the fatigue etched on his face. Eventually, the gravity of his illness forced him into the hospital. That night, I found myself alone in our empty apartment, tears streaming down my cheeks. I turned down my parents' offer to move in with them. Instead, I lay in Ryan's bed, surrounded by his belongings, sinking deeper into despair. It broke my heart to think that Ryan needed a bone marrow transplant. I knew how complicated and costly that procedure was. Financially, we were stable, but finding a suitable donor felt almost impossible. Dr. Cameron had searched Ryan's family thoroughly, but since he grew up in an orphanage, there were no relatives to turn to. I found myself grappling with regret, wishing I had given Ryan the chance to have children who could have been a match for him. As hope dwindled, I gazed out at the hospital garden, lost in sorrow. That's when I overheard two hospital staff members discussing Ryan's condition. Their words struck me like a bolt of lightning. They were talking about how little time Ryan had left. Back home that night, exhausted and overwhelmed, I drifted into a deep sleep. In my dreams, I found myself living in a picturesque village, where life felt ideal. I walked through lush green fields, carrying a basket filled with food. Ryan was there, working in the garden, and I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Suddenly, I heard a little girl calling out, "Mommy." She was around 6 years old, bursting out of a house and running towards me. In that moment, my heart swelled with warmth, a brief escape from the harsh reality. The girl wore a summer hat and a bright dress, her laughter echoing in the air as she frolicked through the meadow. Her golden hair danced in the breeze, a sight that brought tears to my eyes. Out of nowhere, Ryan appeared, joyfully chasing after her. The girl laughed even louder, quickening her pace as they played. I stretched out my arms, beckoning her to come closer, desperate to hold on to that joy. When she leaped into my embrace, Ryan attempted to lift us both, but he lost his footing. We all tumbled onto the grass, laughter ringing out, a fleeting moment of happiness that felt almost real. I remembered waking up from a dream that felt so wonderfully vivid, I almost didn't want to leave it behind. For a brief moment, it lifted my spirits high. After I opened my eyes, I ate a little fruit and felt a strong pull to visit Ryan in the hospital. He had become so weak that he couldn't even sit up, but when he saw me, he greeted me with a smile and a wink. He told me that I looked radiant today. I replied that I felt really good, then I sat beside him and held his hand. Despite his frail state, he weakly returned my grip. I desperately wanted to share my dream with him, but a nagging fear held me back, worrying it might be too much for him. As Ryan drifted off to sleep, I kept holding his hand, tears streamed down my cheeks as I quietly gazed at his peaceful face. After leaving the hospital around noon, I felt an overwhelming urge to take a walk to clear my mind. With each step, I pondered the uncertain future ahead, thinking about the painful possibility that we might never have children together. I recalled our conversations about infertility treatments and the kids from the orphanage. Suddenly, I stopped in my tracks, struck by a thought. I hurried back to the car and drove home with a renewed sense of purpose. Once I got home, I contacted several child welfare agencies, explaining our situation. There weren't many facilities nearby, but one of them offered to set up a meeting. By the time I arrived at the facility, the children were already asleep, so I couldn't meet any of them. The staff explained to me that the adoption process usually took quite a long time, often months, sometimes even years. I expressed my willingness to adopt any child, emphasizing my hope that Ryan could experience fatherhood, even if just for a short time. The staff understood my unique circumstances and agreed to expedite the process. The next morning, as I walked down the hallway, I saw the children waking up and playing outside. My heart warmed at the sight, but then I spotted one little girl who captivated my attention. She looked so much like the child I had seen in my dream. I stood there momentarily stunned, feeling a rush of indescribable emotions. Barbara, the head of the facility, noticed my serious expression and approached me. Still reeling from the shock, I searched for words and replied that I was fine, then asked if I could speak with that little girl. She had been engrossed in playing with dolls, but when she looked up, she flashed a big smile at me. I smiled back and complimented her doll. "Hello, your doll is so lovely," I gently said to her. The girl beamed, her smile brightening her face, and she began to tell me all about her doll, explaining the stories she had created for each one. Barbara approached, relaying the girl's story to me. Her name was Ella, and her mother was in treatment for alcohol and drug dependency, which meant she would be living there for a while. I learned that most families hesitated to adopt children with parents struggling with addiction. Yet, I discovered that amidst all the children being adopted, Ella had never been considered. What struck me the most was that Ella didn't seem sad about her situation, she simply mourned the loss of her friends. This realization shook me to my core, and Barbara understood my feelings, promising to expedite the adoption process as much as possible. For the next few days, the adoption process felt painfully slow, like it would stretch into eternity. I longed to provide Ella with a loving home, eagerly anticipating the moment I could share this news with Ryan. Finally, I received the call I had been waiting for. Barbara came to pick me up from the facility. Excitement coursed through me as I hurried to grab a bouquet and a new doll for Ella. My heart raced with a mix of anticipation and joy. As I stepped into the facility, I spotted Ella immediately. She sat quietly in the corner, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. When she looked up, her sparkling eyes held both curiosity and anxiety. Her golden curls danced around her face, framing her expression that held a small yet hopeful smile. I bent down to meet her gaze, offering her a warm and inviting smile. "Hello, Ella," I said softly. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Do you remember me?" She nodded slowly, her eyes wide with recognition. I continued, suggesting we go to the park and get ice cream afterward. The moment she heard ice cream, her eyes lit up with joy, and she shyly nodded her head. Her smile held a flicker of newfound confidence. When I extended my hand, she hesitated for a moment, but soon her small hand slipped into mine. It felt like a quiet promise of trust blossoming between us. As we left the facility, Ella gripped my hand a bit tighter, her gesture revealing the mix of excitement and nerves for her new life ahead. As I traveled to the hospital with Ella, we chatted about various things, gradually feeling more at ease with each other. When we arrived at the hospital, I felt a rush of hope mixed with nerves, my heart racing as I stepped into Ryan's hospital room. "Hello, Ella," Ryan said gently. "I'm so glad to meet you." Ella shyly waved in greeting, and Ryan turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were brimming with tears, reflecting a mix of gratitude and astonishment. "Thank you, Rebecca, for bringing Ella," he whispered. Ella and Ryan began to converse, albeit awkwardly, and I watched them, enveloped in a whirlwind of complicated emotions. On the way home from the hospital, I noticed Ella sitting quietly in the car, lost in her thoughts. When I asked, "Are you okay?" she finally opened up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Uncle Daniel," she said. Confused, I pulled over, trying to grasp what she was trying to express. I gently explained that he was Ryan, and he would be her father from now on. But she insisted, "He looks like Uncle Daniel." Her words caught me off guard, a storm of thoughts swirling in my mind. Once we reached home, I showed Ella around, and we settled in together. I wanted to ask her about Uncle Daniel carefully, but seeing her anxious expression, I quickly changed the subject. That evening, I prepared a special dinner for Ella and tucked her into bed, yet my curiosity about the mystery surrounding Daniel lingered in my thoughts. Later that night, I called Barbara, the facility director. She only had limited information about Ella's background, mentioning that her parents had struggled with alcohol dependency, and that a neighbor had brought Ella to the facility. The next day, I inquired how I could obtain Daniel's contact information or address. Afterward, I drove several hours to a small town, arriving at the address I had been given. The place had an overgrown yard and a makeshift garbage dump. I cautiously rang the doorbell but received no answer. With a hint of hesitation, I opened the front door and approached the porch. Suddenly, a voice called from inside, "Come in, can't you see the door is open?" It sounded as if someone was waiting for a visitor. I stepped into a house that was old and neglected. The interior was cluttered with worn-out furniture and dust-covered items. An unkempt doll with ink scribbled across its face, bloated and yellowing books, and an old cassette player filled the space. Despite the disarray, a delicious aroma of fried potatoes and onions wafted from the kitchen. That scent seemed to contrast sharply with the atmosphere inside the house. Suddenly, a man appeared in the hallway. The moment I saw his face, I gasped in surprise. He looked exactly like my husband, Ryan. The shape of his eyes, the high cheekbones, the curve of his eyebrows, the hairline, and even the mole on his neck were all strikingly similar. Yet, there were some differences. This man bore the signs of a difficult life, with deep wrinkles around his eyes and a worn expression on his face. His scruffy beard was unkempt, and his clothes were shabby. He wore baggy sweatpants with frayed knees and a loose, faded tank top. "Who are you?" he asked. There was no hint of accusation or threat in his voice, only pure curiosity. I found myself momentarily at a loss for words. "Well, I'm not sure where to begin," I replied, thinking it might be best to show him a picture of my husband first. He shrugged, approaching me silently. Up close, the similarities to Ryan became even more pronounced. I gazed at his face, captivated, and said, "You really look just like him. So, what do you want?" he asked, without holding back. I replied with a smile, "Well, it's quite a complicated story." "Then let's talk while we have some potatoes in the kitchen," he said, leading me toward the kitchen. I sat on a stool in the kitchen, and I began to speak. Nervously, I started to share my story. My words stumbled out, but Daniel listened attentively, never interrupting, his expression unwavering. Though he remained expressionless throughout, I could sense that my story was profoundly impacting him. I finished my story and paused for a moment before I spoke again. "You know, looking at you, I feel like I don't even need a DNA test. You and my husband are just strikingly similar." Daniel stared intently at the photo on my smartphone. His hand trembled slightly, but his expression remained calm. "Are you and Ryan brothers?" I asked, my voice filled with hopeful anticipation. In that conversation, it became clear that this man might be a relative of Ryan's, holding the key to saving him from a deadly illness. "Yeah," he said slowly, nodding. Tears shimmered in his eyes, but they didn't spill over, and his voice trembled slightly. "But I've never met him." He paused for a moment, taking a breath to steady himself before he continued. "It felt like a fateful revelation. I was just 8 years old back then, the only boy in the family." Daniel carried on, and I could feel the weight of his words sinking in.
He had been made to do chores and cook by his stepsisters since he was around 5 or 6 years old. His father wasn't around, and his mother, Joan, had relationships with so many men that he couldn't even keep track of who was who. Under those circumstances, it was a tough life for Daniel. His mother was always drunk and loud, with people constantly coming and going. The pressure from his sisters added to the chaos. Eventually, his sisters followed in their mother's footsteps. What could you expect from women who grew up in that environment? Daniel said. He longed to escape from that family. "I was only 8, but I remember it well." Daniel continued. "I wanted to build a little cabin in the woods and live quietly there. I thought I could survive on berries and mushrooms and live peacefully away from everyone." Around that time, he found out his mother was pregnant again. The children would see their mother's belly grow and know another baby was on the way. "I can't even imagine how to care for another child," Joan lamented. Daniel hoped that this time, it would be a brother. Having a brother was a dream for him, growing up among so many girls. "I wanted to teach him how to fish and carve wood. I wanted to show him how to climb trees. I thought if I could do that, I wouldn't feel so lonely in that house." "Please don't let the baby go," Daniel pleaded with his mother every day. When Joan was in a good mood, she would laugh and make jokes. But when she was upset, her irritation would lead her to hit him for being so persistent. After a while, Joan returned looking thinner and more alive than before. After a week of sobriety, Daniel watched her with a flat stomach and felt hot tears well up in his eyes. His mother had let go of Daniel's baby brother. The baby went into an orphanage, where perhaps he would be taken in by a good family, unaware that his brother was waiting for him. Daniel cried, feeling deep pain and despair. There was nothing he could do. As the years went by, Joan lost her rights as a mother, and the children were sent to different orphanages. Daniel was glad for the clean bedding and food at the orphanage, and the adults' attentive care. However, he left the orphanage. His mother had passed away, and his sisters had disappeared somewhere. Daniel returned to an empty, dilapidated old house with nowhere else to go. He tried hard to build a new life, but it didn't go smoothly. Due to a lack of education, he struggled to find stable work. He started doing odd jobs around town, taking care of yards and chopping wood.
I listened intently to Daniel as he shared his heart-wrenching story. Each word felt like a weight pressing against my chest. But he didn't know the significant role Ella played in our reunion. It was a secret I was just about to reveal. Daniel gazed at me with eyes full of hope, encouraging me to continue. We had always wanted children, but it never happened for us. So we decided to adopt, I began, my voice steady yet filled with emotion. I could see Daniel gradually piecing together that connection. Tears welled in his eyes as I continued. I was guided here by the little girl we adopted named Ella. Ella knows you. His expression shifted to one of anticipation and hope, eager to learn more about Ella. I went on, Ella overcame so many challenges to become part of our family. Tears flowed freely down Daniel's cheeks as he absorbed my words. After calming himself, he began to share more of his story. For years ago, I met a woman named Laura. She loved to drink and party. At that time, Ella was just 2 years old. Laura clearly abandoned her responsibilities as a mother. I was worried sick that Laura would leave Ella behind. And then, she really did, left with a man, abandoning Ella. Daniel's voice trembled as he continued. I did everything I could to take care of Ella. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke. He had the option to take Ella in, but doubt crept into his heart. He feared he couldn't provide the future she deserved. So when she turned 4.5, he made the painful decision to place her in an orphanage. He hoped for a loving family to welcome her and offer a warm environment. I was profoundly moved by Daniel's story. I quietly stood up, took his hand, and embraced him gently. You are a wonderful person, Daniel. Ella is a remarkable girl, and she will become our daughter. It's all thanks to you. I spoke softly, meeting his tear-filled gaze with my own. As we regained our composure, Daniel asked about Ryan, wanting to know more about him. I then shared the news that Ryan was battling a serious illness. I remembered the moment Daniel took the situation seriously and asked, "How can I help him?" My answer seemed to bring him a mix of sadness and hope. I explained Ryan's condition and how urgent the situation was. He needs a compatible donor. I need your help, I said, my eyes shining with hope. Daniel replied without hesitation, of course. I just hope I'm a match. Gratitude flooded through me as I took Daniel to the lab for the necessary tests. Once the tests were done, Daniel eagerly anticipated meeting his brother, Ryan. Meanwhile, Ryan was feeling a little better thanks to the new medication. He looked at my face and smiled, saying, "Hey, sweetheart. You're early today." Excitement colored my voice as I responded, "I have wonderful news." Where should I start? I continued, "There's someone here who's been wanting to meet you." Daniel stood hesitantly at the door, his heart racing. Ryan's eyes held a glimmer of curiosity. "Hey, Ryan," Daniel said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I'm Daniel, your brother." The room filled with a whirlwind of emotions, enveloped in deep silence. As Ryan looked into Daniel's face, the moment their eyes met was electric. It was a moment steeped in complex emotions. Daniel spoke with a quiver in his voice. "I've been living with this thought for so long. Wondering what my brother was like, where he was, and now, finally meeting you." Tears glimmered in Ryan's eyes, conveying feelings that words could hardly capture. "I didn't know I had a brother," Ryan whispered in astonishment. Daniel quietly embraced him, sharing a silent exchange of sorrow and joy. I stepped quietly into the hallway, giving them the space they needed. I felt they required time to talk and get to know one another. When I returned to the hospital room a while later, it seemed Ryan and Daniel had already shared so much. I explained to Ryan how I had met Daniel and brought him here. I remembered the astonished look on Ryan's face as he took in these miracles. Everyone shared in that joy, feeling it ripple through the air like warm sunlight. When we left the hospital, I suggested to Daniel that he join me to pick Ella up from school. Yet, he hesitated, burdened by the weight of the past. I approached him with a smile, wanting him to know I understood his feelings. I reassured him that while his decision was monumental, it was for the happiness we had now. As he pondered my words, Daniel waited at the school, his heart racing in anticipation. When he finally saw 9-year-old Ella, his heart leapt. She was no longer the little girl he remembered, but he recognized her instantly. "Uncle Daniel?" Ella asked, her voice a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Tears streamed down Daniel's face as he apologized for his past decisions and actions. Ella cried as well, her bottled-up emotions flooding out like a river released from its dam. In that moment, they shared their pain and formed a deep emotional bond. 3 days later, I couldn't contain my joy, laughter echoing throughout the house. That morning, I received wonderful news from Dr. Cameron. "Rebecca, I have amazing news. Daniel is a perfect donor for Ryan." Afterward, Ryan underwent surgery. It was complicated and challenging, yet it was a success. During the weeks Ryan spent in the hospital, Daniel became a regular visitor. Each time, he brought gifts from the forest, infusing Ryan's room with life. Wild berries and earthy-smelling mushrooms seemed to breathe new energy into that sterile space. "Where did you find these?" Ryan asked, holding a large mushroom, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Oh, I found them in a little secret spot in the woods," Daniel replied, a mysterious gleam in his eyes. "These are treasures of nature." As Ryan began to recover, he transitioned to healing at home, and Daniel's visits continued. His presence was just as precious as the gifts he brought. They often sat together, sharing stories and laughter. "Daniel, you saved my life," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. Daniel shook his head, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "I just did what any family would do, Ryan." Once Ryan was on the mend, he was eager to help Daniel find a larger place to live. I suggested, "Why don't we look for a bigger house where we can all live comfortably together?" That idea took off quickly, and soon enough, we all shared the same roof, creating a home filled with love and laughter. I remembered how gracefully I embraced the role of a mother, nurturing Ella with visible love. I asked her, "What do you think of this dress?" while bringing out a colorful array of outfits. Ella smiled brightly, eager to help me make my selection. Ryan found joy in spending time with Ella too, helping her with homework and taking her roller skating at the park. He decided to enlist Daniel's help at his company, and Daniel's technical expertise proved invaluable, becoming a treasure for the business. I could still hear Ryan's encouraging words as he patted Daniel on the back, saying, "You're amazing," when Daniel's project succeeded. Living together brought a rhythm to our lives, resonating with love and mutual support. Daniel, who once felt so alone, no longer experienced that emptiness. I remembered the night he said, "I never thought it would come to this," as we all shared laughter and stories in the living room. I took Daniel's hand and said, "We are family, and this is how family is meant to be." When Ryan fully recovered, our lives blossomed with more adventures, strengthening our bond even further. Our laughter and stories filled the air, weaving a tapestry of joy and memories. Then, 6 months after we began living together, a delightful surprise awaited Daniel. One afternoon, as he left the office, he found Ryan, Ella, and me waiting for him, our faces lit with excitement. I revealed, "We're going on a trip," with a sparkle of mystery in my eyes. As we drove, I sensed Daniel's curiosity turning to anxiety. He asked, "I can't believe we're headed there, right?" as he recognized the familiar landscape. Ryan placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, saying, "Don't worry." When we reached our destination, Daniel braced himself for a house that might resemble a ruin, yet what lay before him was nothing like he imagined. The walls of the once dilapidated house were freshly painted, and the garden burst with vibrant flowers. I exchanged a proud and emotional glance with Ryan. I gently stated, "I didn't want this place to go to anyone else." As Daniel toured each room, he felt the loving care that had transformed the space. The living room, once dull and lifeless, radiated warmth with comfortable furniture and framed pictures capturing new moments of life. He whispered, "I can't believe this," his voice thick with emotion. His heart swelled as the painful memories of the past mingled perfectly with a sense of hope. Tears streamed down his cheeks. That night, we gathered around the table for a modest celebration, our laughter echoing throughout the house. We established a new tradition, deciding to return to this home every weekend and holiday to continue building our future together. As winter approached, we celebrated our first Christmas in the renovated house. Handmade decorations and a brightly lit Christmas tree became symbols of our new family. We exchanged gifts, but what we cherished most was the bond we had created. Ryan, Daniel, Ella, and I spun a story filled with hope and love, beautifully transformed. Having once been separated, each of us navigating our own struggles, we reunited to weave a new life, rich with colorful warmth like a tapestry. Through our journey, we learned that true love transcends mere blood ties.
What did you think of this story? Let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to check out the new stories. You will surely be surprised.